Imagine, if you will, a quiet American town, nestled beneath a sky heavy with stars. The kind of place where front doors are often left unlocked, and the biggest news is usually a high school football game. But even in the most serene corners of our world, shadows can lurk, and the most ordinary lives can be ripped apart by extraordinary evil. We are drawn to these stories, aren't we? This morbid curiosity, this need to understand the darkness that sometimes walks among us, disguised as a neighbor, a friend, a stranger in the crowd. If you find yourself captivated by the chilling depths of human nature and want to delve into tales that explore the very fabric of fear and justice, please consider subscribing or liking this story. Your support helps me bring more gripping narratives to life. Now, prepare to step into a different kind of quiet, the kind that precedes a storm. A storm that shook a nation. The first whispers began in Harmony Creek, Ohio, a town so quaint it seemed lifted from a postcard. Old brick buildings lined Main Street, their windows reflecting the autumn leaves that painted the surrounding hills in fiery hues. Children rode bikes with carefree abandon, and neighbors left their doors unlocked, a testament to the trust that thrived in such a community. But on a crisp October morning, that trust shattered like fragile glass. Detective Sarah Jenkins had seen her share of horrors in her 20 years on the force, but nothing quite prepared her for the scene at 14 Willow Lane. Evelyn Reed, the town's beloved librarian, a woman whose smile could melt glaciers and whose heart was as open as the books she curated, lay lifeless in her meticulously kept living room. There was no forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a profound, unnatural stillness. Evelyn, 83 years young and sharp as a tack, had been found by her paperboy, slumped in her favorite armchair, a teacup still clutched in her hand. The cause of death, the preliminary report stated, was blunt force trauma to the back of the head, delivered with surprising precision and strength for an elderly victim. Sarah, a woman whose keen eyes missed nothing and whose intuition was as sharp as her wit, knelt beside the body, her gaze sweeping the room. It was too clean, too perfect. A single, peculiar detail snagged her attention. Nestled carefully in Evelyn's open palm, not visible until the teacup was gently removed, was a small, ornate silver key. It looked antique, a miniature work of art with delicate filigree, unlike anything Sarah had ever seen associated with a crime scene. No keyhole in the house seemed to fit it. It was a message, she felt, a chilling signature. Chief Miller, a man whose tenure was defined by petty theft and lost cats, was out of his depth. His face was a mask of bewildered terror. Who would do this, Sarah? Evelyn? Everyone loved Evelyn. Sarah merely grunted, her mind already racing. Someone who wants us to know they were here, Chief. Someone who enjoys the game. The initial investigation yielded nothing. Evelyn had no enemies, no shady past. Her life was an open book. The silver key became their only tangible lead, a cold, silent enigma. Forensic teams scoured the house, finding no fingerprints beyond Evelyn's own and the faint, smudged prints of the paperboy. No DNA, no hair fibers, nothing. It was as if the killer had simply materialized and then vanished into the autumn air. For 3 agonizing weeks, Harmony Creek held its breath. The initial shock gave way to a creeping paranoia. Doors that had always been open were now locked. Children were called inside earlier. Whispers of a lone wolf, a madman, spread through the coffee shops and church pews. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly, chasing down every dead-end lead, interviewing everyone who had ever spoken to Evelyn Reed. The key was sent to specialists, but it yielded no modern answers, just confirmation of its antique origins, possibly turn of the century, mass-produced but distinctive. Then came the second tremor. Mark Henderson, the high school football coach, a strapping man in his late 40s, found dead in his secluded cabin on the outskirts of town. Like Evelyn, there was no forced entry. Like Evelyn, the scene was eerily clean, devoid of struggle. And like Evelyn, clutched in his stiffening hand, was an identical silver key. This time, the weapon was a heavy, antique bronze paperweight, likely taken from his own mantelpiece. The casual savagery of it sent a new wave of terror through Harmony Creek. A beloved old woman, a pillar of the community, and now a powerful, respected coach. The victims seemed to have nothing in common. No apparent links beyond their standing in the town and their brutal, silent ends. The modus operandi was chillingly consistent. Stealth, an intimate murder, no forensic evidence, and the enigmatic silver key. News channels, initially dismissing Harmony Creek as a one-off tragedy, now descended like vultures. Reporters swarmed the town, their sensational headlines screaming about a silent reaper, a phantom killer who left only a cryptic calling card. Sarah found herself giving strained press conferences, her face grim, offering platitudes about working tirelessly, while privately, a cold dread settled in her gut. She knew this wasn't random. She knew the killer was playing a game, and they were all just pieces on his board. The FBI arrived, led by the sharp, no-nonsense agent Maxwell Thorne, a man whose reputation preceded him. Thorne, a specialist in serial homicide, was initially respectful, but his presence grated on Sarah. She felt Harmony Creek was her town, her responsibility. Yet, she couldn't deny the help was needed. Thorne's first assessment confirmed her worst fears. A highly organized, intelligent, and deeply disturbed individual. He pointed out the subtle, almost artistic placement of the keys, a deliberate act of communication. "He's sending a message, Detective Jenkins," Thorne stated, his voice calm but firm, during their first joint briefing. "The question is, what is he trying to unlock?" Sarah stared at the enlarged photo of the silver key, projected onto the screen. It was all they had. A symbol, a challenge. Harmony Creek, once a bastion of peace, was now a town under siege, gripped by a fear that seeped into every home, every conversation. The whispers had turned into screams, and everyone knew, deep down, that the Silver Key killer was not finished. The autumn leaves continued to fall, crimson and gold, mirroring the blood that had been spilled, and the town braced itself for the next chilling installment of terror. Sarah Jenkins knew she was racing against a ghost, a predator who moved unseen, unheard, and who seemed to hold the key to their darkest fears. The Silent Reaper moniker, coined by a sensationalist New York tabloid, clung to the killer like a shroud. After Mark Henderson, a third victim fell just 2 weeks later. Amelia Vance, a vibrant, young art teacher, found in her downtown loft. The scene was a haunting echo of the first two: no forced entry, no struggle, a clean kill using one of her own heavy clay sculptures, and the ubiquitous silver key placed delicately in her hand. The pattern was undeniable, the signature chillingly consistent. The nation watched in horror. Harmony Creek, once an anonymous on the map, became the epicenter of a chilling crime wave. Every major news network had a satellite truck parked outside the police station, vying for sound bites from a visibly strained Sarah Jenkins and the increasingly frustrated Agent Thorne. The FBI had deployed a full behavioral analysis unit, turning the sleepy town into a hive of activity, swarming with agents, profilers, and forensic specialists. The profilers painted a terrifying picture. A highly intelligent, meticulous individual, likely a local or someone with deep knowledge of the area, who blended seamlessly into the community. He was driven by an internal narrative, a twisted sense of justice or grievance, and the keys were not just a signature, but a symbolic message only he understood or perhaps intended for a specific audience. The lack of DNA or fingerprints suggested extreme caution, possibly even a specialized methodology. They speculated he might be wearing full-body suits or meticulously cleaning the scenes. Sarah, now working round the clock, felt the weight of the town's fear on her shoulders. She barely slept, haunted by the faces of the victims, by the cold glint of the silver key. Her apartment was a chaotic mess of case files, maps, and crime scene photos. She and Thorne, despite their initial friction, had forged an uneasy alliance. Thorne, with his vast experience, respected Sarah's local knowledge and relentless drive, while Sarah grudgingly admitted Thorne's systematic approach brought a much-needed perspective. "These keys," Sarah muttered one late night, hunched over a microscope examining the intricate filigree. "They feel old, like they're trying to tell us about the past." Thorne, equally exhausted, nodded. The BAU suggests the killer isn't just killing for the sake of it. There's a ritual here, a story he's enacting. The victims may represent something, even if it's not immediately obvious to us. They chased every possible connection between Evelyn, Mark, and Amelia. Age, profession, social standing, nothing linked them. They were pillars of the community, well-liked, respected. This randomness was perhaps the most terrifying aspect, making everyone in Harmony Creek a potential target. The town became a ghost town after dark, residents locking themselves indoors, mistrust turning neighbors into strangers. Whispers of a vigilante group forming began to circulate, adding another layer of tension. Sarah, following a hunch, decided to dive deeper into the history of the Keys. She spent days and then weeks poring over antique catalogs, consulting with retired locksmiths, and even contacting historical societies across Ohio. The Keys were generic enough that they were hard to trace, but the specific style and material, a particular alloy of silver, seemed to point to a specific period, late 19th to early 20th century. One old locksmith, retired and living in a neighboring town, recognized the design. "Ah, those," he'd wheezed, his voice raspy with age, "remind me of the old Providence locks from the Ohio Valley. They weren't high security, mind you, more for small chests, diaries, that sort of thing. Some were even given out as commemorative items. There was an orphanage, I think, just outside Harmony Creek, that had them made up for the children or maybe for lockers. Long gone now, of course." The word orphanage hit Sarah like a jolt of electricity. An old orphanage, long since demolished and forgotten. Its grounds now a desolate patch of overgrown woods on the edge of town. Harmony Creek had buried its past, literally. Could this be it? Could the Keys be linked to this forgotten place? She shared the revelation with Thorne. "The Providence locks," she explained, pointing to old archived newspaper clippings. "The Harmony Creek Children's Home. Closed down in the 1950s after a scandal. Neglect, abuse, rumors of children disappearing. The records are sparse, almost deliberately so." Thorne's eyes lit up. "A buried past. A forgotten institution. This could be our motive, detective. A killer avenging a forgotten wrong. The victims? They could represent the new Harmony Creek, the one that built over its sins." The investigation shifted gears dramatically. They began meticulously reconstructing the history of the Harmony Creek Children's Home. They sifted through dusty state archives, old town records, census data, trying to piece together the identities of the children and staff who lived and worked there. It was a painstaking, frustrating process, as many records were incomplete or destroyed. Meanwhile, the fourth victim was found. This time, it was a young pastor, Father Thomas, known for his compassionate work with the poor and his booming, optimistic sermons. His death was particularly brutal, the killer using a crucifix from the church altar. The silver key once again was present. The sheer blasphemy of it, the violation of a sacred space, ignited a fresh wave of public outrage and despair. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Calls for martial law, for a mass exodus from Harmony Creek, for answers grew louder. Sarah and Thorne worked relentlessly, fueled by coffee and a burning need for justice. The pattern of victims, now that they considered the orphanage angle, began to make a twisted kind of sense. Evelyn, the librarian, keeper of knowledge. Mark, the coach, a symbol of guiding youth. Amelia, the art teacher, nurturing creativity. Father Thomas, the spiritual guide. They were all figures who represented care, guidance, and community in the new Harmony Creek. Perhaps the very things the children of the old orphanage were denied. The killer was sending a message. You built your perfect town on forgotten sorrow. You celebrate these pillars of virtue while ignoring the foundations of pain. As the nights grew colder and the fear grew deeper, Sarah felt the killer's presence drawing closer. She knew they were on the right track, but the sheer volume of forgotten history, the countless names lost to time, made finding their monster feel like searching for a needle in a haystack of ghosts. The Keys were unlocking the past, yes, but in doing so, they were also opening a terrifying door to a present where a predator walked free, driven by a decades-old grievance, and Harmony Creek was bleeding. The breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Sarah, exhausted but relentless, was cross-referencing a faded photograph of the Harmony Creek Children's Home from a 1948 local newspaper with the names on the last known staff roster. Among the blurry faces, a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, stood slightly apart from the other children, his eyes dark and haunted, fixed on the camera with an intensity that unnerved her. She zoomed in, noticing a small, dark wooden box clutched in his hands. It was the only detail that made him stand out. A small detail, but in her current state it screamed. The boy's name, listed in the scant accompanying caption, was Arthur Finch. He was one of the few children who had been at the orphanage through its most turbulent years, from the age of 7 until its closure when he was 12. After the orphanage shut down, Arthur, like many others, had simply vanished into the foster care system, his records becoming a dead end. But what if he hadn't truly vanished? What if he had returned? Agent Thorne, equally fixated on the orphanage records, had focused on the staff. He discovered a pattern of staff members being dismissed or quietly leaving due to unprofessional conduct or lack of suitability. One name, Mildred Perkins, a particularly cruel matron notorious for her harsh punishments, stuck out. She had been fired just a few months before Arthur Finch left the home. Arthur Finch, Sarah mused aloud, her finger tracing the boy's face on the screen. An outsider, an observer. He would have known the orphanage's darkest secrets, felt its injustices keenly. She then looked at the list of current Harmony Creek residents who had moved back to the area in the last decade. A quiet, unassuming antique dealer on the edge of town, known for his reclusive nature and fascination with local history, bought and sold old trinkets, including various keys and locks. His name? Arthur Finch. The revelation hit them with the force of a physical blow. The seemingly random victims suddenly made chilling sense through Arthur's eyes. Evelyn Reed, the librarian, whose kindness might have been a cruel reminder of the warmth he never received. Mark Henderson, the coach, a symbol of the guidance and male mentorship he lacked. Amelia Vance, the art teacher, embodying the beauty and creativity denied to a child in a desolate institution. And Father Thomas, the pastor, representing the spiritual comfort and justice that had abandoned him. Each victim, a pillar of the new Harmony Creek, represented an aspect of the stable, nurturing life Arthur had been robbed of. And the silver keys? They weren't just a signature. They were the very keys to the small, cheap lockers and boxes the children at the orphanage were given to keep their meager possessions, a symbol of their limited freedom and the secrets they held. The team moved quickly but discreetly. They put Arthur Finch under surveillance. His antique shop, a relic of time, was a dusty labyrinth of forgotten treasures, its windows always slightly obscured. He was a creature of habit, quiet, solitary, polite but distant. He was, in every way, the unseen man the profilers had predicted. The surveillance team reported a peculiar activity. Arthur often visited the overgrown grounds of the old children's home, spending hours there, meticulously clearing away brambles from a specific, dilapidated stone wall that was all that remained of the building. He was tending to a forgotten grave. Sarah and Thorne obtained a warrant. The raid on Arthur Finch's shop was executed with precision. Inside, the shop was a museum of the macabre. Alongside antique furniture and trinkets, they found a hidden room. On a workbench, a collection of Providence locks keys, meticulously cleaned and polished, lay arranged in a disturbing pattern. There were journals filled with neat, obsessive handwriting, detailing the abuses at the orphanage, the names of the staff who inflicted them, and the perceived indifference of the town. There were also chillingly detailed plans for each of the Silver Key murders, complete with maps and photos of the victims. And tucked away, carefully preserved, was the same small, dark wooden box from the old photograph, empty except for a faded child's drawing and a single, tarnished Providence lock key, undoubtedly his own. The journals confirmed their theory. Arthur Finch had returned to Harmony Creek, consumed by a burning desire for revenge against a town he felt had forgotten and erased the suffering of children like him. He felt the town had built its new, shining identity on the grave of his childhood trauma. His victims were carefully chosen, not for any personal slight, but as symbolic sacrifices representing the very institutions that had failed him. He saw himself not as a murderer, but as an avenger, unlocking the truth the town had suppressed. Arthur was not in his shop. A frantic search began. The surveillance team confirmed he had left an hour before the raid, heading towards the old orphanage grounds. Sarah and Thorne raced to the site, the abandoned, overgrown land now feeling charged with a malevolent energy. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. They found Arthur near the stone wall, meticulously placing a fresh silver key on a small, makeshift shrine he had built, surrounded by children's toys and wilting flowers. He held a small, antique hammer, his eyes distant and chillingly calm. "Arthur Finch!" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the silence. He turned slowly, his face devoid of emotion. "They forgot, Detective. They buried us. They built their perfect lives on our broken ones." His gaze, usually so meek, now held a terrifying clarity. "These keys, they unlock the truth." The confrontation was tense. Arthur, despite his unassuming demeanor, was strong, fueled by decades of suppressed rage. He lunged at Sarah with the hammer, seeing her as another symbol of the system that had wronged him. Thorne intervened, and a desperate struggle ensued amidst the crumbling stones and whispering trees. Arthur fought with the ferocity of a trapped animal, not for escape, but for the finality of his mission. Finally, after a desperate, bruising struggle, Thorne managed to disarm and subdue him. Arthur lay on the damp earth, his breathing ragged, his eyes still fixed on the makeshift shrine, murmuring names from the past. Mildred, Matron Jones. They all forgot. The arrest of Arthur Finch brought a profound, if fragile, sense of relief to Harmony Creek. The Silver Key Killer, the Phantom, had a face, a name, and a chillingly coherent motive. The news exploded across the nation. The story of the forgotten orphanage, the vengeful survivor, and the symbolic murders gripped the public. It sparked widespread discussions about forgotten institutions, systemic neglect, and the long-lasting scars of childhood trauma. Harmony Creek slowly began to heal, but it was forever changed. The trust was shattered, the innocence lost. Yet, in the aftermath, there was also a renewed commitment to remembering its past, to ensuring no child's suffering would ever be buried again. The grounds of the old children's home were cleaned up, a memorial erected, and town historians began to meticulously document the lives of the children who had passed through its doors. Sarah Jenkins, hailed a hero, found herself profoundly altered. The case had ripped open not just a town's history, but the dark corners of the human soul. She understood, now more than ever, that the most terrifying monsters weren't always grotesque creatures, but often quiet, unassuming individuals, forged by unspeakable pain, waiting patiently to unlock their carefully constructed revenge. The silver keys, once symbols of terror, became a haunting reminder of the secrets a community could keep and the devastating price of forgetting. The whispers of Harmony Creek had died, replaced by a somber silence, a deep and lasting echo of the truths Arthur Finch had so brutally forced them to confront.